Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome in. This is FST, Fantasy Sports Today. My name's Matt, his name is Joe, and even though the playoffs are almost upon the precipice, there are still ways to cash. Joe knows it. Hit the pay line in DFS. Pull up on those wagers, those props, those over-unders, however you need it to be done. Joe, I'm excited because weeks like this, in all of wagering, in all of sports, I really think is where you can cash in the most. Good morning. What's going on?
Good morning, my good friend Matt Striker. We did it. We made it. We're here. In the words of Jimmy Fallon, it's week 18. The football season goes by pretty quick, so sometimes you got to stop and look around. Otherwise, you might miss it. And for those lunatics that might be playing their finals this week in fantasy, I want to recommend to you therapy. I want to recommend to you perhaps Talkspace. I hear that's a very popular thing with the kids nowadays because this is stupid. You should not be playing your fantasy football championships in week 18. Why? Because people are sitting some of the best players on the planet this week. So why would you be deciding fantasy championships that you put months and months and hours of your life towards in week 18? And yet people still do it every year. I feel like they're doing it less and less, which is a good thing. But week 17 is when you should be deciding these things. However, now that most of us are sitting around and those things have been decided, and hopefully most of you did win those championships or at least got to the ship. It's always tough to win it. Always wacky things happen. The McCaffrey injury last week was one of them. But now is a time where we can start pivoting, as Matt always likes to say, to different ways to invest, whether it be daily fantasy, whether it be the props market, whether it be just betting outright on things. And that's what SportsGrid is here to do, and that's what we're going to do on FST for the next 2 hours. We're going to take a look at that slate, take a look at the props for Week 18, and things get wacky this week. So we'll start with the wackiness, which is, again, the teams that have locked things up. Baltimore yesterday, sitting players. San Francisco is going to be sitting players today. The Rams will be sitting players as well as the Cleveland Browns. So big-time starters will be resting, and that's going to have a big impact on games. It's going to make things a lot more volatile. You're going to see defenses, especially with teams that have nothing to play for, they're cashing it in. They're looking for their plane ticket. They're going home. They're going to some island somewhere. It's time for vacation. The NFC South is up for grabs today. So finally, hopefully, Tampa can handle their business against the lowly Carolina Panthers. And if they can't, then they don't deserve it, damn it. They don't deserve to be in there if they can't handle their business against a 2-win team. Can you tell, Matt, that I'm a little upset that Tampa didn't handle their business last week? Can you tell that I had investments in Tampa last week and it didn't come to fruition? But do you think Baker Mayfield and the Bucs are up for this task? And who would have thought we'd be talking about the Bucs winning this division potentially here in Week 18? Your thoughts on Baker and his bunch this Sunday?
Hang on, let me cough it out. You get what I'm trying to say, but I hear you, all kidding aside. For the health and the pulse of the league, for the wagering options and all these things, we all hope for a certain outcome. But for me, I'm with you about what you're saying about how volatile this time of year can be. So that's my political answer, if you will. Wink.
How nice. How nice. A political answer. So he's Matt Striker. He endorses this message. You can send the donations to mattstriker.com, which I don't know if that's a thing, but now that I'm thinking about it, maybe I'm going to, right after the show, maybe at the break, I go and I find this and I get that domain.
Find my domain name.
That's what it is. There you go. Also, continuing on with the headlines, this could be the end for Derrick Henry in a Titans uniform. He's going to be a free agent at the end of this year. A lot of expected turnover here. So I would expect Derrick Henry to go out with a bang, get a ton of carries, what seems to be potentially his swan song in Tennessee. Now, where he latches on next year, we'll see. Whether Mike Vrabel decides to stick around too, we shall find out. I know there's been some rumors and buzz that maybe Robert Kraft wants to tap him as the next coach of the New England Patriots. I think it would make a lot of sense if he can get out of that deal, or if Robert Kraft is willing to move draft capital to do that. I think Vrabel's done all he can with Tennessee. I think the minute they traded A.J. Brown was the minute that organization started to go in the wrong direction. And I feel like the stats back me up on that, especially the ones in the win column and the loss column. I think those have really made a significant difference. It's not a good move, not a good football move, and they really haven't recovered since. And of course, today, a lot of things at stake in terms of the playoffs and also potential spoilers. And that's what we're looking for. Teams like the Giants who could stick it to the Eagles one more time. You look at the schedule today, you've got big game tonight. You got the Buffalo Bills and Miami Dolphins missing guys like Mostert and Waddle. So a lot of things going on here, a lot of injuries to worry about. It's week 18. It's a long season. It's a brutal season. But last night, Matt, we got a preview of a playoff game. We got our first playoff game, even though it was a regular season. And it was a great one. Yeah, the Pittsburgh Steelers got their W against the second-string guys in Baltimore. But how about those Houston Texans? The Houston Texans winning and getting in the playoffs, a team that nobody thought was going to win 4 games. They draft C.J. Stroud, who, if you go back and look at all of our coverage back in April, we talked about him being the best quarterback in this class, the most complete one that could step in and be good right away. I think we were in the minority in that discussion. It looks like we were right about him. D'Amico Ryans has done a tremendous job. Will Anderson has been a tremendous influence on this defense. They have, I think, defied all expectations, and maybe, just maybe, they've been the best story of the NFL. Last night, a great game. Jonathan Taylor, 188 yards rushing. No slouch. I mean, they did everything they could. They came up a little bit short yesterday. Gardner Minshew came up a little short. Great effort from him, stepping in when Anthony Richardson was out. But when you step back and look at what the Texans did this year, is this the one-off anomaly because no one saw him coming? Or is this, you think, the turning of this organization into what could be a very bright future?
Good question, and it's funny for all those out there. You know, Joe and I talk about baseball a lot. We had this conversation about the Diamondbacks, I remember, a few years ago. Like, are they a one? Not a few years, a few months ago. Are they a one-off? I think the league is starting to turn, and you and I, again, also talk about the fact young quarterback play, different types of offenses now are going to dictate how we draft differently in our season-long fantasy leagues. I think the Texans, the Jaguars are spearheading that movement in a way that Arizona is spearheading the movement in baseball. And we'll talk about that in maybe a month, in a few weeks. But the point is that we have to be ahead of the curve and see the trend. And that's where we are. And you are one of the few. There's a lot of name talking heads or receipts out there that were using terms like a bust and it's not going to be anything for guys like Stroud and stuff. You were on it. I'll tip my cap to you and give you your flowers.
Go read the Black Book from this year again. Go get it on Amazon. You'll see the write-up on C.J. Stroud and the rookies, and he's that top dude. Now, Richardson has a very high ceiling, and he could be a very special talent. He needs a little bit more time in the oven. But my goodness, what an incredible performance it was from C.J. Stroud last night on the road, to credit to him. And speaking of Anthony Richardson and the Colts, Shane Steichen is a great football coach. Shane Steichen is going to have a really good run here. We're going to be talking about the AFC South for, I think, a very long time as this kind of new hotbed division. I think there's a lot of fun things, especially if Jacksonville can get themselves together a little bit, maybe get some more offensive line help for Trevor Lawrence. That would be nice. But think about that. I mean, Richardson, Stroud, Lawrence all in the same division. That could be an incredible thing for the next decade. But also the quality of the draft picks and the draft capital that the Texans required and that they were able to put into place. Just astounding. And it tells you how important leaders are and the quality of the character and the talent is. You need both of those things if you're going to turn an organization around. And credit to everybody on that coaching staff, everybody in that front office for making these good decisions, because the Texans are in the playoffs. That is not a phrase I thought I'd be saying in week 18. A lot of other things we might say. What will we say? Who only knows? But you should stay around and find out when we come back right here on FST. We'll be right back.
It looked like it was going in. It hit the upright and bounced out and did not go in. There's more scoring in an MLS soccer game than there is this Cotton Bowl. The Chargers didn't know what the hell to do with Staley for years. They're a clown show in chief. Denver's got this issue, Gabe. Like, the Chiefs must just be sitting there going, wow, what a bunch of brain trust we work with in this division.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
But I don't think Mark is a quarter of the man his dad was. I'm sorry, he's kind of an embarrassment. The only thing I'll give him credit for, which is the only thing he's ever done right in his life, is get that team to Las Vegas for $6 billion.
Teams that bring in a lot of transfers, well, I was talking to Jeff about this, they need time They're at a point now in conference play, they can start to get rolling.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
We spent all offseason where the NFL said, hey, just so you guys know, running backs don't matter. If we then this year give the MVP to a running back, the irony. I am disappointed that they lost to FAU because secretly I don't really like this FAU team very much. I don't know, they're just not for me. And now they've completely legitimized the Owls.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network.
We'll look at the Heisman
The
Trophy
early line.
and what it all means. Individual success.
You should have tried to get something for Anthony Rendon. Not bought at the deadline.
Newswire.
We're getting a lot of news, trades, cuts, and some movement in terms of starting quarterbacks, backup
Pharrell
quarterbacks.
Coast to Coast.
I want to watch great players make buckets and win games.
Game time
I have
decisions.
no idea what the heck the Blazers are doing and what they
In-game live.
Just
Prime
took them
time.
yard for a grand slam.
The bottom of the fourth inning in a 12-2 baseball game. We got football scores going on at Wrigley right now.
Sports Rage
That was good
Late
betting.
Night.
We waited for a 1.5. We got paid.
We did.
Did like a 2.5. Jumped on.
There's no taking weeks off in golf betting ever. These are the best weeks to bet.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back into FST Fantasy Sports today. Matt and Joe with you here. And as I said at the top of the show, even though we're on the precipice of the postseason in the National Football League, that does not mean that we stop earning. No, right now is the time where you could maybe have your biggest week out of them all. And it starts by building a DFS lineup. We start at the running back position. But before we go there, Joe, I understand you have some major seismic breaking Major League Baseball news, something that could change the wagering landscape. What is it?
Sean Manaea signed with the Mets, it looks like. So, yeah, there's my offseason as a Met fan.
Oh.
And people wonder why I am the way I am sometimes. But, look, you know, the Mets are a team that is trying to do things differently for a change, which is okay. Look, I got to say, I did enjoy as a Mets fan the spending spree of Steve Cohen and trying to go and win. It didn't work, so you blow it up and you try with the kids now, and that's fine too. But patience, I think, wears thin for the New York baseball fan,
Snell's
just
still
generally
out there,
speaking.
I think, right? We can have this conversation at another time. There's still stuff to be had, but let's talk about what we
You
do
think
know.
Snell in New York, honestly, you think Snell in New York, you really think that's like the thing that is a good fit?
No, but at this point, you can make it. No, you can have it make sense.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, at least your Cardinals went out and were aggressive in the pitching market. That you can give them.
A lot of mid
we'll find out.
arms there. I don't think they're done, but I think listen, that division is always up for grabs, and they're always in the discussion for futures with regard. I mean, this is still a wagering show. If you always look at the St. Louis Cardinals and the Brewers, they're always going to be. But that division is much different now because you have teams like Cincinnati and Pittsburgh that can turn this whole thing around, or at least take in a lot of the handle or the wagering. But I digress. It is football, and it is about football here. So let's apply the same logic to how we build our lineups, because we're starting at the running back position here. And a team that you were talking about before the turn that will lead us into how we wager is the Jacksonville Jaguars. So is Etienne an interest to you at 8,800 on FanDuel and 7,300 on DK?
After that pronunciation, he's even more of an interest. That was beautiful. 8,800 on FanDuel, 73 on DK. Travis Etienne is a guy that, look, he's the number 3 running back in half-point PPR this year in fantasy. He's averaging 15 points per game. It's a very solid point total here for him. The only guys ahead of him are Christian McCaffrey and Raheem Mostert, who have an enormous amount of touchdown equity over the season. Both have over 20 touchdowns. So Travis Etienne has been really good this year. And he's been getting it done in the passing game and in the rushing game. And last week against Carolina, coming off a huge game, 16 carries for 102. It was a great performance. Now, this week he's taking on the Titans, which is a tougher front. Let's be honest. They're 13th against the rush. I feel like they've had some hiccups, though. They have given up some big games. But more importantly, when you're looking at the shape of this game, you have to look at the shape of Week 18. Certain teams are all in here. Certain teams have to win, put themselves in positions in order to make the playoffs. And the Jaguars are one of those teams now. There's pressure on them. So the Jaguars need this W in the worst way. This is it. It's win or go home, basically, situation for them, unless a lot of other wacky things happen. So with Trevor Lawrence being questionable and being banged up as he has been, with the injuries that they've had to Christian Kirk and other pieces here along the way, Travis Etienne is going to get a lot of work in this game. So if we're playing the volume game, Etienne is one of these players that I think comes with a lot of potential volume in this game. He's going to work in the passing game, maybe even a little bit more than you expect. I think that's a very important thing here against the Tennessee Titans, and I think you're going to see that. And, if you look at the last game against the Tennessee Titans, 14 carries for 52. He also had 3 catches on that day, but it was a short day in terms of what he gave you in fantasy points, only 7 half PPR points. So it was not the best day. He needs to have a better game here against the Tennessee Titans the second time around. It's very important because if he does not, with Trevor Lawrence not being 100%, the Jaguars could very well be looking from the outside in. The Texans handled their business last night. That's it. Now it's a matter of, can the Jags take care of theirs? And Travis Etienne is going to be one of these pieces I think that is going to be very important today. And when you're looking at all these running backs like Christian McCaffrey, who's sitting, like Kyron Williams, who's sitting, some of the guys we've talked about and some of the other teams, all of a sudden we don't have as many choices as we want. And some of the choices we're left with are less than thrilling. So it's a good place to start, but I think there's some better choices than Etienne in terms of return on investment on the price. And those guys we'll talk about next.
All right. Now let's turn to a team that I use as an excuse to cough on camera, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. When you asked me a pointed question about Baker Mayfield, and I danced around it, well, 2 left feet, but regardless, the music kept playing. Let's go to Rachaad White, 7,700 on FanDuel, 7,600 on DK. This has been a really, really nice return on investment week over week. And again, a tip of the cap to you for bringing it at least to my forefront. Joe?
Yeah, the number 5 running back in fantasy on the season, and now we have a lot of perspective. Rachaad White was not a guy that I was very much in on. I just figured he was kind of empty volume, but turns out it was more than that because Baker Mayfield exceeded anyone's expectations, and I think it's fair to say he exceeded the expectations of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I would not put it too much onto the fantasy analyst community or the wagering analyst community or even Las Vegas, who also did not think very much of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But they exceeded expectations, so you got to give them credit. And Rachaad White's been a big part of that. So that volume that seemed to be just kind of empty ended up being a lot more valuable. And this is a matchup today against the Carolina Panthers, 23rd ranked rushing defense here. They are 3rd against the pass, but that's also a little bit skewed because teams get up on them and then don't throw on them anymore, and they're just running out clock. So that's one of those things. It's not because they're so good at shutting down offenses. It's because offenses that are on the opposition get up on them early and just kind of ride out the clock in the second half of the game. So that's where numbers sometimes can be misleading and rankings can be misleading when you look at them. So again, you got to take some of these stats with context and a big grain of salt. That's what you got to do. But Rachaad White last week, disappointing. Only 6.5 half PPR points. So not the greatest day from him. But if you look at the previous weeks, 18 points, 20, 16. He's been getting it done. So last week was a disappointment against the New Orleans Saints. We all know that. This should not be a disappointment today. The division's on the line. I think Tampa handles their business. I know it's a decent-sized number today. I would still take them. I don't think Carolina's got the fight in them at the end of the season to be spoiler. I don't know if they have the talent or the concise coaching staff put together in order to pull that off. So sometimes the chalk is dangerous and you feel like it's too good to be true, but I'm going to go with Rachaad White here. I think it's too good of an investment to ignore. The volume's there. The touchdown equity is there. The work in the passing game is there. He's a part of this offense. He's a main cog. And it's a very simple offense. Again, you can pair him with Baker Mayfield and with Mike Evans, and you got a pretty good start to your day.
Yep, absolutely. Great stuff as always. All right, let's keep the train moving here. A guy that I think will be highly rostered. Actually, let me play this game. You tell me. Give me the percentage that you think Devon Achane will be rostered here this week. 8,200 on FanDuel, 6,900 on DK. Your thoughts?
Well, I think it's going to be very chalky. People are going to like Achane because he's got such a explosiveness to him, right? And with Mostert out, he's going to get a lot more run in this backfield. Now, other people are going to touch the ball too, but this is a huge game again. The East is at stake here in the AFC because everything's ending on Sunday. We're getting all the games kind of clumped together, which is unique. So Achane's definitely going to be highly rostered. I would think somewhere in the 20 to 25% range probably, especially because he is a little bit cheaper than normal because the anticipation was Mostert was going to be there. But there's some other guys too if you go a little further down the trough. I think if you're looking at James Conner, 7,300 over on FanDuel, 6,100 on DK. Conner has a lot of appeal today as well. I think Conner is a guy that we all thought was going to be better most of this season, and it's been kind of a down first half for him. But in the second half, he's really picked things up. And really, this Arizona team that coming off a big upset last week really, I think, is making some noise here at the end. 128 yards rushing last week. Now, I don't expect him to catch the ball a ton in this game, but I do believe you could look for another big, solid performance. 22 points, 16 points, 19 points, 25 the last 4 games for him. And do not sleep on Zamir White. We've been talking about this guy quite a bit. It's a tremendous matchup for him today. Josh Jacobs out again, as we anticipated that happening. He was doubtful all week. It was the last game of the season. I think the Raiders are going to come out here with a lot of fire. They love Antonio Pierce. They want Pierce to be their guy next year. They play for him. I think they're going to show up against the Broncos and that 31st ranked rush defense. If you look at the price tag for him too, just 6,500 on FanDuel, 6K on DK. You know he's going to get the workload. Last 2 weeks, 20 carries last week, 22 carries the week before with incredible performance against KC. I think White, Conner are 2 really good lower tier backs that you should start. Who should you start at QB? We'll tell you after this.
It looked like it was going in. It hit the upright and bounced out and did not go in. There's more scoring in an MLS soccer game than there is this Cotton Bowl.
The Chargers didn't know what the hell to do with Staley for years. They're a clown show in Chief. Denver's got this issue, Gabe. Like, the Chiefs must just be sitting there going, wow, what a bunch of brain trust we work with in this division.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
But I don't think Mark is a quarter of the man his dad was. I'm sorry, he's kind of an embarrassment. The only thing I'll give him credit for, which is the only thing he's ever done right in his life, is get that team to Las Vegas for $6 billion.
The teams that bring in a lot of transfers, while I was talking to Jeff about this, they need time. They're at a point now in conference play they can start to get rolling.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
We spent all offseason where the NFL said, hey, just so you guys know, running backs don't matter. If we then this year give the MVP to a running back, the irony. I am disappointed that they lost to FAU because secretly I don't really like this FAU team very much. I don't know. They're just not for me. And now they've completely legitimized the Owls.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network.
We'll look at the Heisman
The
Trophy
early line.
and what it all means. Individual success.
You should have tried to get something for Anthony Rendon. Not bought at the deadline.
Newswire.
We're getting a lot of news, trades, cuts, and some movement in terms of starting quarterbacks,
Pharrell
backup quarterbacks.
Coast to Coast.
I want to watch great players make buckets and win games.
Game time decisions.
I have no idea what the heck the Blazers are doing and what they
In-game live.
Just
Prime
took them
time.
yard for a grand slam.
The bottom of the 4th inning in a 12-2 baseball game. We got football scores going on at Wrigley right now.
Sports Rage
That was
Late
good betting.
Night.
We waited for 1.5. We got paid.
We did.
Didn't like the 2.5. Jumped on
There's
it.
no taking weeks off in golf betting ever. These are the best weeks to bet.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back in. FST Fantasy Sports Today. Matt and Joe with you here in the middle of building DFS lineups. We went through the running backs and we were economical given what is in front of us. So now it's time for quarterbacks. So let's start at the top. Joe, Josh Allen. A lot on the line here. 9,500 on FanDuel, 8,300 on DK. What's the game script look like to you?
Well, you hope it's a competitive football game here. And I think the likelihood of it being one-sided is probably low. Josh Allen, like it or not, folks, is the number one fantasy quarterback in terms of total points. He's the 1-1 right now. And in terms of points per game, he's at 24 points per game. That's pretty good. Last time I checked, the next closest is Jalen Hurts at 23. So despite some of the shortcomings recently of Stephon Diggs, which we can get into that over and over again. Is it just a product of the Joe Brady changeover? Is it a product of Stephon Diggs losing his step? Or is it a product of maybe there's this offense evolving into something different and new? Regardless, Josh Allen is really interesting. And I think the Josh Allen value is one that a lot of us continue to chase and try to figure out. A lot of us will always say, well, it's very easy. It's Allen and Diggs and you move on. Well, it hasn't been that way since week 6. That's the last time Stephon Diggs put up 100 yards receiving. That's a long time ago. He was still getting targets most of the time, but just not coming to fruition. Kincaid had this little moment there for a little while, and then that kind of disappeared and kind of bounced back last week, so that's tough to handle. Gabe Davis is 20 points or 0 points. I don't think that's the route you want to take. And then there's James Cook, who James Cook was getting a lot of work and all of a sudden wasn't getting a lot of work. So really at the end of the day, I think what we're looking for is trying to understand the value of Josh Allen today. And I think the best value of Josh Allen, if you're going to roster him, is by himself without his friends. Just run him out by himself. Now, it's very expensive to do that. You can use guys like Zamir White. You can also use some other players that we're going to talk about later at wide receiver and a tight end that might be a little bit cheaper too. You could throw out there some names. There's even running backs like Pierre Strong, right? Pierre Strong's going to get a lot of opportunity today with Jerome Ford sitting for the Cleveland Browns and Kareem Hunt probably getting some rest time too. I think you're going to see a lot more Pierre Strong in this game. And I know when Derek Brown joins us in hour 2, I'm sure he's going to bring that up as well. So those are the kind of guys you might have to pivot to in order to get up to Josh Allen, because Josh Allen is super expensive. He's top of the board. And frankly, there's a lot of other quarterbacks playing today, even guys like Sam Darnold who are going to get a start, who are kind of in play considering the offense they play in and the matchup that they have presented to them. So Josh Allen's real value is tied up in one big thing: 15 rushing touchdowns, Matt. 15. That's an incredible number of rushing touchdowns this year.
Tell me all the guys that's more than. I like when you do that. That's more than this
rushing
team.
touchdowns. I will tell you, it's more than everybody except for one other guy, Jalen Hurts, who also has 15. The next closest guy has 6, and his name is Josh Dobbs, who has not played a ton of games this year. So there's your stat of the day.
Less than
a little
15
early.
Rushing touchdowns.
Well, I did throw that stat out a couple weeks ago that the Jets had 9 passing touchdowns in the season, and Joe Flacco had 7 since he had come back. And that was, 2 weeks ago? I think we had that conversation. But I digress. Josh Allen's value is tied to Josh Allen getting all the fantasy points in his offense. If he's throwing a touchdown, he's rushing a touchdown. Josh Allen, solo Josh Allen, is probably the best way to roster Josh Allen because there's too much variance in what's gone on in Buffalo all season long to invest in anything else.
All right. Point, period, statement made.
There you go.
Let's move on. All right. So you mentioned there are other quarterbacks going. You mentioned how this is a top of the board play, and we often talk about building multiple lineups. So let's say if we're looking for a pivot point and we want to build some different lineups, let's go down to Justin Fields. 8,400 on FanDuel, 7,200 on DK. And we can even continue the conversation and you can talk about Jared Goff as well. But I'll let you start with Justin Fields.
Look, Justin Fields, I don't think people have realized, necessarily how good he has been recently in terms of fantasy productivity. I know there's been some down moments like against Cleveland, but that is one of the tougher passing defenses around right now. We talked about it that day. We said, hey,
Yes.
Fields is a fade this week. In fact, he's also an under on those passing yards. I remember we talked about that prop. I think it was in the 200s. They ended up at 168. So today's going to be different. This is a unique opportunity here where I think this game is very important from the Chicago Bears perspective. This is the last impression you're going to make here. If you're Fields, if you're the head coach, if you're everybody associated with what's gone on here this year with the Chicago Bears, if you go and beat Green Bay and kind of ruin their day and ruin their season here, I think it leaves a really good taste in Bears fans' mouths and the organization's mouths too. And maybe Justin Fields is indeed the guy that we want to build the organization with, because they have a lot of picks early on right now. The Bears are looking at, do we want to change things over and take a quarterback? Do we want to use this pick to acquire more picks or acquire more talent? They can go a lot of different ways. Fields is one of my favorite plays today. It's a unique situation too, where that Green Bay pass defense is really kind of falling apart at the end of the year. They are still 28th against the rush. So that's a long day at the office trying to stop Justin Fields, who is good for at minimum 45 to 50 rushing yards in a game. You could see him go as high as 100 in this game. Like, that's not off the table. Last week, 32 pass attempts, 268 yards. He'd have the one passing touchdown, the one rushing touchdown. Again, that's what he brings. But in 3 of his last 4 games, he has put up 25 points. So to me, why pay for Josh Allen when I can get Justin Fields? And Justin Fields comes a little bit cheaper than Allen. And I think that's a pivot I'm willing to make, because Allen is 9,500 and Justin Fields is 8,400. And last time I checked, that $1,000 difference goes a long way with the rest of the squad I'm trying to put together.
Yeah, no, I love it. You're 100% right. So if Allen's 9,500 on FanDuel and Fields is 8,400 on FanDuel, if I told you that the indoor-outdoor cat of Jared Goff was 7,500 on FanDuel, is that a safe tier to go, dare I say, down to and still be able to be competitive? That's my question.
It is. The Lions and Dan Campbell are going to play, because that's who they are, because they're a football team and that's what they're going to do. I have to imagine you would have been first in line to try to get Dan Campbell to cut a promo on somebody. Like, that's got to be a great interview. Like, I want to see more Dan Campbell backstage with steel chairs hitting guys. I want to see him taking out other opposing coaches. I'll see you out at midfield. Like, I love Dan Campbell. Any wrestling fan's got to love Dan Campbell. And he's going to play. Now, the good news is Jared Goff is inside, as you said. Jared Goff, indoor cat. He likes the indoors. It's not like it's cold outside. He doesn't like the cold. But look, this is a good situation here. He is far less appealing to me than Justin Fields, and certainly Josh Allen too. Fields is still where I'm going. The tough thing with Goff too is could be big Amon-Ra game, could be Laporta, it could be Jahmyr Gibbs. So there's a lot of variance there, where the best thing about Allen is it's just Allen. The best thing about Fields is what it is. It's DJ Moore. And that's a very easy pairing to start with this week. And I think DJ Moore's price is grossly undervalued this week. I think those two guys have proven when they're on the field together, it's pretty special. Think on this. In week 1 against the Packers, Justin Fields and DJ Moore had combined to 2 of them, 2 catches for DJ Moore for 25 yards. He went on to have 1,300 yards the rest of the season receiving. Now, that's a big difference. Everybody was panicking week 1. Just as a reminder, now everything comes full circle again. And I think the Bears are a different team. I think they have a lot more confidence in what they're doing. And I think Green Bay is kind of falling apart at the end here a little bit. So Jordan Love is in play too. Jared Goff is in play. But I think there's another quarterback we're going to talk about next. It's even cheaper that we talked about last week as well on the program. It brings some rushing equity, brings some ability, a little fragile, which worries me just a little bit because you never know if he comes out of a game. But the next guy on our list, I think, is worthy of discussion for week 18. I think he could have a good game and a better one against a defense that's also falling apart at the end.
Dynamite setup. You mentioned how this team is poised to play a spoiler role against their nemesis. I know people usually associate this team with Dallas, but you have to start to associate the New York Football Giants with teams like Philadelphia. Tyrod Taylor is a player of whom we are speaking. 7 even on FanDuel. Think of the things you can do. 5,300 on DK. That's another conversation entirely. Joe, the floor is yours.
Love him on DK. Like on DK, he opens up so much. So as much as I want to have Fields or Josh Allen, why wouldn't I try to get 20 points out of Tyrod Taylor at that price? Like, that's just crazy to me. I got to try there, especially because DraftKings pricing is so much tighter. I think the top tier guys are so much more expensive. It's really hard in terms of the ratio of the pricing. whereas FanDuel's a little bit looser, and that's more fun to make up multiple lineups and play around with. But Taylor was a guy we used last week, and he was way cheap last week too, and it worked. In fact, he was in the $1 million lineup last week too, so no surprise there because he had a 19-point day. And when you get a 19-point day out of a guy who's 5K, it's going to be a good Sunday. You're going to have a good time. What a way to start the new year, right? But Taylor's got a unique situation here facing the Eagles, and the Eagles are not the Eagles anymore. They are the 28th ranked pass defense in the league. You can throw. And the other thing too is the receivers are cheap. So if you want to go with Slayton, who's been his guy, it seems like, and you look at the target share that he's been getting, that's a really cost-effective pairing that allows you to go up to the board for the Rashad Whites and the Mike Evans and some of the other pieces that we're going to talk about later in the show as well. So in terms of quarterback, Taylor's a great value. Fields is a great value. They're my favorite two guys. Also, they bring that rushing equity too if you want to pivot from super expensive Josh Allen.
All right. You mentioned one player, and it brings us into the tight ends. You mentioned Sam Laporta's tight end play. He's 7,300 on FanDuel, 6,200 on DK. And I'll throw one more out at you for time. Trey McBride, 6,700 on FanDuel, 6 even on DK. What can we do with both of these players, Joe?
Look, they have been both just absolutely tremendous. I think if you're looking at players that are getting so much work in their respective offense, look, we saw Sam Laporta in week 1 establish himself, and he has been great ever since. Now he's the number 1 total cumulative fantasy point guy at tight end above Travis Kelce right now. We'll see, what changes here today potentially, but look, 7 receptions last week on 12 targets for 84 yards. He is part of this offense. He's exploded in some big games. He's been quiet in some others, but that's the nature of tight end. And then Trey McBride, you look at what he's done, even cheaper. He is a guy that you could play as a flex today. And we never talk about that at tight end. Last week, I had a lot of Likely and McBride lineups together. And there's another guy, too, getting basically averaging 9 targets in the last 6 weeks. You're going to take those 9 targets to the bank. Again, most tight ends, they have that up and down streak in them. But these guys are getting opportunity, and opportunity means points. What does that mean, though, for the guys at wide receiver? They'll tell you get an opportunity to beat them back right here on SportsGrid.
It looked like it was going in. It hit the upright and bounced out and did not go in. There's more scoring in an MLS soccer game than there is this Cotton Bowl.
The Chargers didn't know what the hell to do with Staley for years. They're a clown show in Chief. Denver's got this issue, Gabe. Like, the Chiefs must just be sitting there going, wow, what a bunch of brain trust we work with in this division.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
But I don't think Mark is a quarter of the man his dad was. I'm sorry, he's kind of an embarrassment. The only thing I'll give him credit for, which is the only thing he's ever done right in his life, is get that team to Las Vegas for $6 billion.
The teams that bring in a lot of transfers, I was talking to Jeff about this, they need time. They're at a point now in conference play, they can start to get rolling.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
We spent all offseason where the NFL said, hey, just so you guys know, running backs don't matter. If we then this year give the MVP to a running back, the irony. I am disappointed that they lost to FAU because secretly I don't really like this FAU team very much. I don't know. They're just not for me. And now they've completely legitimized the Owls.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network.
We'll look at the Heisman Trophy,
the early line,
and what it all means. Individual success.
You should have tried to get something for Anthony Rendon. Not bought at the deadline.
Newswire.
We're getting a lot of news, trades, cuts, and some movement in terms of starting quarterbacks.
Pharrell Coast to Coast.
I want to watch great players
make buckets, and win games.
Game time
I
decisions.
have no idea what the heck the Blazers are doing and what they need.
In-game live.
Just
Prime
took him
time.
yard for a grand slam.
The bottom of the fourth inning in a 12-2 baseball game. We got football scores going on at Wrigley right now.
Sports Rage
That was
Late
good betting.
Night.
We waited for 1.5. We got paid.
We did.
Situation. Didn't like the 2.5. Jumped on
There's
it.
no taking weeks off in golf betting ever. These are the best weeks to bet.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back into FST, Fantasy Sports Today. Matt Striker and Joe Pisapia with you here, building our DFS lineups. And I'd like to remind everyone our social media handles, and it's important, at least to me, because Joe Pisapia is, for me, the prevailing voice in this space, not just because he's my friend, not just because he's on the show. If I didn't work with him, I'd still be following him, and I do. Says so much. And within that, you miss a lot of it. So if you follow us at SportsGrid, at SportsGrid TV, you have that with you wherever you go. You have it in your pocket, and you can refer to it on your time. And that's what it's all about. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid because you can take in information on your time. And that's how we process it best, in my opinion. At SportsGrid TV. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, don't forget the app as well. And that, of course, is for the serious fan. All right, we've done quarterbacks. We've done running backs. Now, someone's got to catch the ball, Joe. Wide receivers. Let's start with CeeDee Lamb. 10,000 on FanDuel. When's the last time a receiver commanded that number? 9,300 on DK. Start there.
It's not as long ago as you think. I mean, Justin Jefferson in his, healthy times, he could get up there. I remember the past years of Antonio Brown before Antonio Brown became Antonio Brown, when he was just Antonio Brown, the wide receiver. He had some pretty high price tags that were up there too, and he would deliver. And that's the thing. It's like you're paying this premium productivity for the best wide receiver on the planet. A guy coming off a 227-yard receiving game, you're paying a premium for recency bias. But he's had a touchdown in every single game since week 10. Just want to put that out there. It's week 18. Every single game he's had a touchdown. So in terms of, getting it right, he is the wide receiver 1 on the year. He's got 1,600 receiving yards on the season. He's got 12 receiving touchdowns this year. I mean, the guy's just been unbelievable. But what also is unbelievable is the price tag. And it is large when it comes to CeeDee Lamb today. And it's tough to get in there. Now, again, we talk about some of the guys that you can pivot to. We talked about Pierre Strong, right? We talked about some other Zamir White, right? There's places where you can start to find some latitude with the budget, but you're probably going to have to go down to the Trod Taylor as a quarterback, right? Which is okay. That's not a bad idea. The other thing you have to ask yourself, too, is when you look at the splits here, this is a road game, and this offense has not been the same on the road as it has been at home. Yes, they've still been good at times, but they haven't been quite the dominant turf show that they have been when you get them out there in space. The Washington Commanders, we know, are kind of a team that probably is going to have some more changes ahead of them. Probably a team that is looking to the offseason, not so much this game potentially, but it is also an in-division game, so you just never know when the Commanders show up because they've shown up twice against the Eagles, so it's really hard to gauge this squad. Now, he is a very good investment in terms of productivity. In terms of price, he is a difficult one. He's at the top of the board for a reason, but this price is really baked into how good he was last week. So is he going to have another 30-point day? It's asking a lot because some of the other good days, you're looking at 22 points, 26 points. That's not really 3x value for a wide receiver at 10K. So it is a lot. It's probably too much for me. And especially when you're considering the situation on the road, I think that's another factor. And the last time we faced the Commanders, 4 catches for 53 yards and a touchdown. That's a good day. That's 15 half PPR points. That's not 10K return on value. And I'm not saying we're going to copy and paste. And I'm not saying that it's not week 18 and the Commanders aren't going to potentially quit and not want to guard CeeDee Lamb. But you're really threading the needle with 10K, where CeeDee Lamb has to be pretty much the guy he was last week. And I just don't know if that's in the cards. I think that's asking a lot.
All right, so let's move down now. I mean, I don't see this as price relief. 9,500 on FanDuel, 9,400 on DK. I'm talking about Tyreek Hill, but the concern for me, and please try, allay these fears, How long are these stars staying on the field on afternoons
well,
like this?
This one's staying on the field because this is about the AFC East. So Buffalo, is going to bring everything they've got here to the table against the Miami Dolphins today. And I think that we're hoping, that Tyreek Hill's ankle is another week more healed and a little bit better, because before this ankle injury, he was breaking ankles. And now he has not been quite that same guy. I think we've all seen that the last few weeks. Still great, still Tyreek Hill, but not quite as dominant as he was before the ankle sprain. And I give him a lot of credit for playing through it. You've seen a lot of guys this year not play through this injury at all. And he has soldiered through. And you kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? People complain if you sit out, they'll complain if you're not the same guy. So you really can't win. And I think sometimes that's unfair for all of us as fans and all of us as analysts that we don't take that into account. So let's give Tyreek Hill some credit first and foremost. They're playing through the injury. You know what it's like to work through injuries. It's not fun. Your work is not the same, especially if you take great pride in your work, and I think Tyreek Hill does. Now, all that being said, as you mentioned, still very expensive. I think there's better ways this week to find some wide receiver one play without going to Tyreek Hill, without going all the way up to CeeDee Lamb. I'm not saying you can't do it. Of course you can. These guys are magnificent players. They're capable of games that will basically break the slate. We've seen that, and it's going to be a competitive game tonight, we hope. But sometimes these games underperform. Sometimes it is tight because these teams are familiar with each other. Sometimes the pressure does get to some of these teams. So we'll see if it gets to Tua. We'll see if he's able to overcome that pressure. But it's a big price. I just don't know if I can overcome that. So I'm going to fade Tyreek Hill too. Again, it's not that I can't roster him and I'm just choosing not to. But if I had to pay up for one of those two guys, I'm going to pay up for the healthiest guy, and that guy is CeeDee Lamb. I'd rather pay the extra $500 and get him.
All right. So to the folks out there that want neither Lamb nor Hill, is Amon-Ra St. Brown a good pivot? It's 8,800 on FanDuel. It's 8,600 on DK. I can even throw out Mike Evans next. 8,400 on FanDuel, 7,400 on DK. Talk to me.
Yeah, Amon-Ra St. Brown, it's all about that volume, right? What we always talk about with him. He's got 154 targets on the season, 112 catches already. It's a pretty darn good season. He's also got 9 touchdowns to go along with that. So he's just incredibly consistent. If you're looking at the guys ahead of him, we're talking about Michael Pittman, who's got more targets than him, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, believe it or not, and CeeDee Lamb. There's also A.J. Brown on that list too. So it's an elite list, and Amon-Ra St. Brown is an elite wide receiver. I think we've all understand that and established it. He's a little bit cheaper, 8,800. He's going to get some work in this game, obviously. The defense is ranked 15th overall for Minnesota, 19th against the pass, so they do struggle a bit there. They've struggled with Amon-Ra St. Brown in past games and past years, so that's also something to keep in mind. The last 2 times these teams met on Christmas Eve, 12 catches on 14 targets for 106 and a touchdown. That was a 22-point day in half PPR for Amon-Ra. That's a big day. They did not have an answer for him, and I feel like Minnesota is just kind of I feel for Minnesota. They have done everything they can to stay competitive through terrible circumstances. They lost Kirk Cousins. They lost Justin Jefferson. They lost TJ Hawkinson. I mean, they have somehow kept it together and fought and clawed, and it's just not good enough. And today, I think, is unfortunately going to be another reminder of this, what a painful season this has been for the Vikings, but give them a lot of credit, too. They did not throw in the towel. They just continued to come up short. And last year, everything broke their way. The Vikings had literally everything break their way. Every 1-point game went their way. Every 3 points or less game went their way. So they had a lot of good luck, and this year, a lot of bad luck in terms of injuries, and a lot of bounces did not. And I don't think that their ball is going to bounce their way today. And I think that's why Jared Goff is appealing along with Amon-Ra St. Brown, because that is a duo that is pretty unstoppable in that building in Detroit.
All right, speaking of unstoppable, you, my friend, in open space, very hard to cover. I'm going to turn you loose here because you mentioned him. 8 even on FanDuel, 7 even on DK. It's DJ Moore, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, DJ Moore, definitely that guy. And I do want to come back and talk more about Mike Evans, too, because I know you put him in there. But since we brought up Moore, look, we got to mention this guy. He's 8K. He's a lot cheaper there on DK, surprisingly cheaper, too, 7K. That's a really good value. Love DJ Moore on DK this week. So DJ Moore with Justin Fields is amazing. Without Justin Fields, less amazing, but that's understandably so. Now, I know some people will panic. They'll look at that game against Arizona, and they'll say, he didn't really show up in that one. And then the game against Cleveland, we already talked about, that was disappointing. But when there's good matchups on the table, he hasn't disappointed. Against Detroit, 23 points. Against Minnesota, 16 points. Against Detroit the week before that, 19 points. So DJ Moore shows up, and then last week against Atlanta, 26 points. I'm telling you, they know what's going on here. Fields knows what's going on. This is a statement game here, and I'm going to bet on the elite athlete making a statement with it. And that means forget the running game because it's too hard to gauge who's getting the carries for the Bears. Forget Cole Kmet, who's been dealing with injuries. Keep it simple. The pairing of Fields and DJ Moore is a really sound pairing today, and I think it's going to return value against the Packers. And then to your point, too, Mike Evans, this was a guy a couple weeks ago against the Carolina Panthers. We were basically saying if you don't roster Mike Evans today, you're just doing it wrong in DFS. And 7 catches for 162 and a touchdown. It's a pretty good day for Mike Evans. He has always had good days against the Carolina Panthers, and I don't anticipate this not being a good day for him. 8,400 on FanDuel, 7,400 on DK. He has way more touchdown equity than Chris Godwin has all year. If you like Godwin, who's been getting a lot of targets, that's fine. But if you're looking for the guy who's going to really be that dude for you in these tournaments today, Mike Evans has got to be that guy. And I think as we continue to look back on this season, this was another player. I know I was kind of fading again for the same reasons. We're talking about, well, you got to fade the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense because they're not going to be very good this year because Baker Mayfield is an unknown. Well, Baker Mayfield's figured it out. Maybe he needed to get humbled. Maybe some maturity is set in, bounce around the league a little bit. But it looks like he's settled in, and I think it's great. And Mike Evans is a first-ballot Hall of Famer. Whether you like it or not, folks, the consistency of this guy for 10-plus years now, putting up 1,000 yards receiving, is stunning. And staying healthy enough to do it is incredible. So, again, great season for Mike Evans, an unexpected one, but one today that I want to take advantage of again against the Carolina Panthers with that division on the line in Week 18. It's a big game for them. All hands on deck. And Week 18 is not a lot of hands on deck. Find the ones that are and use them when you can.
Yep. You mentioned Tyrod Taylor and the Giants being in a spoiler role. I do believe that Darius Slayton will have to be a part of that in some regard. He's 5,700 on FanDuel, 4 even on DK, dare I say free square. Joe, thoughts?
Yeah, you said it, and you ain't wrong. 4K on DK allows you to do a lot. And here's the thing. How many guys are going to have 4K are going to get the target share this guy's getting recently? Now, I know 2 weeks ago against the Eagles, he only had 3 catches, but he had 90 yards and a touchdown on those 3 catches against those Eagles. And last week, he had 4 catches on 6 targets for 106 yards and another touchdown. The first game that Taylor was in there against with New Orleans, 4 of 8 for 63. So Darius Slayton is apparently the go-to guy here for Taylor, and certainly a red zone threat as well. So I think this is a really unique pairing. So if you put Slayton and Taylor together, that allows you potentially to squeeze in a CeeDee Lamb, right? Or an Amon-Ra St. Brown or one of these higher priced guys. Now, that's a really good alternative where you're getting a lot of good productivity, a lot of good target share, a lot of good fantasy point potential in one spot there. The rushing equity that Taylor brings as well. I think the Giants and Brian Daboll are going to show up because that's what the Giants have done all year. The Giants have not been a good football team, but I don't think we really question the effort level of the Giants. Even if you go back and watch that game against the Buffalo Bills, the effort level there was huge, a few weeks back. Like they continue to show up because Daboll is a good coach. They just haven't had health on that team. They, I think, played above their expectations last year. And I think this year things came back down to earth. The offseason for the Giants has got to be about soul searching. I know Jalen Hyatt was a draft pick last year. He really hasn't done much this season. We'll see if they think next year he can. But I think the Giants kind of got to reevaluate. Yeah, is Daniel Jones really our guy? We made the investment in him. If we're going to stick to that, things got to change. What do they do with Saquon Barkley? That's a huge question mark too. My guess is they free up that Barkley money and they don't extend him and they look elsewhere and spread that money around. And I think in this version of the NFL, that's probably the right call. When we come back, we're going to talk about the numbers and the stat of the day. This one could surprise you. We'll talk about it when we come back right here on FST.
It looked like it was going in. It hit the upright and bounced out and did not go in. There's more scoring in an MLS soccer game than there is this Cotton Bowl.
The Chargers didn't know what the hell to do with Staley for years. They're a clown show in chief. Denver's got this issue, Gabe. Like, the Chiefs must just be sitting there going, wow, what a bunch of brain trust we work with in this division.
Sports Rage Late Night, only on SportsGrid.
But I don't think Mark is a quarter of the man his dad was. I'm sorry, he's kind of an embarrassment. The only thing I'll give him credit for, which is the only thing he's ever done right in his life, is get that team to Las Vegas for $6 billion.
The teams that bring in a lot of transfers, I was talking to Jeff about this, they need time. They're at a point now in conference play they can start to get rolling.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
We spent all offseason where the NFL said, hey, just so you guys know, running backs don't matter. If we then this year give the MVP to a running back, the irony. I am disappointed that they lost to FAU because secretly I don't really like this FAU team very much. I don't know. They're just not for me. And now they've completely legitimized the Owls.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network.
We'll look at the Heisman
The early line
and what it all means. Individual success.
You should have tried to get something for Anthony Rendon. Not bought at this deadline.
Newswire.
We're getting a lot of news, trades, cuts, and some movement in terms of starting quarterbacks,
Pharrell
backup quarterbacks.
Coast to Coast.
I want to watch great players make buckets and win games.
Game time decisions.
I have no idea what the heck the Blazers are doing and what they do.
In-game live.
Just
Prime
took 'em
time.
yard for a grand slam.
The bottom of the fourth inning in a 12-2 baseball game. We got football scores going on at Wrigley right now.
Sports Rage
That was good
Late
betting.
Night.
We waited for 1.5. We got paid.
We did.
Didn't like the 2.5. Jumped on
There's
it.
no taking weeks off in golf betting ever. These are the best weeks to bet.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Great.
All right, welcome back into FST Fantasy Sports today. During the break, Joe and I talking, as friends do, and I do not use that term a lot with a lot of people. And it comes upon us that there are a lot of things that we bemoan and begrudge in life. Oh, I got to get up and go to work. Folks, these are the things that make us the people that we are. Embrace them. It's a tale of two cities. It's the best of times. It's the worst of times. And that is the perfect segue into our stat of the day as it pertains to Stephon Diggs and his production this year, Joe.
Well, it's been the worst of times recently for Stephon Diggs. Just how bad? Well, the stat of the day will tell us from NFL Stats. Stephon Diggs this season, weeks 1 through 9, 70 catches for 834 and 7 touchdowns. Woo-wee! That's pretty good. Weeks 10 through 17, not so good. 30 catches for 262 and a touchdown. So things have really not worked out well for him. Perhaps now is the best chance for him to have a good game and rebound and help get the Buffalo Bills at the top of the AFC East. That would be a good story for Buffalo, not giving up on this season. That has been a very challenging one for them. Buffalo just continues to be a team that keeps searching for an identity. I thought when they made that change, it seemed like that Joe Brady change from Dorsey was good, and it seemed to be working out, and James Cook was getting the football a lot, and then that's started to go away. And then Leonard Fournette was around, and I'm just confused.
Remember him?
I think the Buffalo Bills are confused. Matt's confused. I'm confused. You're probably confused. And maybe Stephon Diggs is confused too. Maybe Stephon Diggs has hit that wall. Maybe Stephon Diggs is just not jiving with Allen. Whatever the reason is, it has not been good, and it's been for a very long time. It's a bad combination. And if Diggs does not show up today, and the Buffalo Bills fall short, man, oh man, that is going to be a really tough sell to this fan base that had big expectations this year with a team that's been very competitive the last few years. And maybe that window's closing. I don't like to be hyperbolic, but this is television. So it's kind of fun to be a little dramatic here.
And
perhaps the Bills' window will be closing just a little bit today. Or maybe they'll just kick it wide open. We'll see. We'll come back. Hour 2 starts right now of FS2.